Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the HSMAI Improving the Morning meeting. So today, I'm going to talk to you about how you can get your morning meetings or your meetings in general up to a new standard. And there's really three things that I want to talk to you about. The first one is about revenue meetings. How often do we actually discuss revenue in our hotel? So how much time do we put into it in order to drive performance, get informed, or just purely to meet as an informational meeting? Then I want to look at structuring your conversation. So by you adding a structure to your conversation, you will be able to follow a certain sequence that will give you a 360-degree view of your business, and therefore everybody can join in at different parts of the conversations, regardless if they have been there before or after. And then, last but not least, I want to look at different industries and what they do from a static versus dynamic meeting. So if there's no other questions, let me jump straight in. If we look at a typical hotel, and your numbers might be slightly different, there's a few times where we interact talking about revenue management or talking about revenue. We have daily, weekly, quarterly, and yearly meetings. So the yearly one is really your budget meeting. And at the end of it, you have to sit down and give somebody an hour and a half, 2-hour presentation of what you want to do from a revenue perspective for the next 12 months. Quarterly meetings are also known as business review meetings. So business review meetings really are relatively strategic. They're looking at the next 3 to 6 months, something that we can impact, but really something that will not yield an immediate result then and there, but it's something that in the next meeting you will figure out and find out. Then we're coming into more of the tactical things. So the daily meetings might be your daily huddle. They're generally in any hotel between 8:30 in the morning and 10 o'clock, 10:15 in the morning, where you get together and you talk about different performances. Relatively short time frame by starting -1, which is really how did we finish up yesterday, to then the next couple of days, 1, 2, 3 days, depending on which day of the week. Your weekly meeting, this is what we classify as your revenue meeting. And a lot of times you have hotels spending about an hour and a half. So overall, if you tally all of those things up, you're spending roughly 120 to 150 hours talking about revenue in some form or another in your hotels. Now that excludes any kind of prep time or after time. So you can essentially double that. So 300 hours a year, you are dedicated to talking about revenue. So we want to make those 300 hours count. How do we make them count? Well, by building a sequence. And the sequence is relatively straightforward. Now think about it. Regardless if you talk about yesterday, regardless if you want to talk about next week or any day in the future, in your mind, somebody will ask the question, hey, what do we have on the books right now? Really just to say, what is it, 50%, 40%, 90%? Where do we stand at this point in time for that given day in the future? Somebody will then say, that's great, but what is our forecast? Where do we actually think we're going to finish up? We're at 50%. We believe we're going to get to 80. As a direct result of that, then it's okay, 80. Okay, how are we priced? Are we priced correctly in order to get 80? How do we get 90? How can we leverage the forecast and the pricing and what we know about what we have on the books by segments, by hotel level, to drive our business forward? Now, if you haven't done a sequence, you can start at hotel level. There's nothing wrong with taking little steps to drive your engagement forward. We're then looking at competitive sets. So you looked at yourself, you kind of looked at where we're going, you looked at how you're positioned, and now you're looking at your competitive set. So how are their actions and my actions giving me a market dynamic, so to speak, where I can really see, does it all make sense if I look at the same day from different angles? To really then have at least one person in the room asking you, so how do we look after against our budget then? Because a lot of times that's still a discussion that needs to happen. Are we going to hit budget or not? The forecast is down, the forecast is up. but essentially the budget is something that I need to talk to my asset manager, to my owner, to my GM, to any kind of investor, depending on the structures that you have in hotels. So really straightforward, on the books, forecast, pricing, competitive set, and budget. All of this data is out there. All of this data is available to you. If you want to look at your competitive set and you don't have a rate shopper, you can go on Booking.com, Trivago, Expedia. To find that one day, to find it out, you look into your PMS. You don't have a forecast. Generally, you have a gauge or an idea of where you're going. Now, having done that, you can take it one step further and actually say, okay, let me build in two more things. One is pace, and one is finished last year. Now, that adds a different dimension to it, because not only do I say, hey, what's more on the books right now, but it will also say, how does that compare to the same time last year? So am I up or am I down? Now that I know my forecast, how does it actually compare to last year? Again, it will give you an indication of, can I be a bit more bullish? Can I be not as bullish as I would be if I know that I'm ahead? Am I in line with my strategy? We talked about the meetings previously. You have quarterly meetings, you have strategic meetings, you have budget meetings. How am I performing against that in this point in time by looking at last year and my pace information? And ladies and gentlemen, being back on pace is not a bad thing if it is a strategic decision that you have taken to say, last year I took too many groups, I'm going to hold back on the groups, and I understand that until I hit my booking window about 2 weeks out, I will be able to monetize. But until then, every time I look at that pace data, it will show me that I'm back year on year. But it's a strategic decision. It's not a, oh my God, we now got to really drop our pants and go out there and really get panicky. Moving on from here, I said earlier there's 3 things that I wanted to talk to you about. The first one, the second one are both covered. Now we're coming to the third one, which is really about static versus dynamic. And I want to bring in here something out of the technology world. And they have a daily Scrum meeting in a lot of companies. What it really just means, it's your morning huddle. But the morning huddle in most hotels is a backward-looking exercise. What you want to turn it into is a forward-looking exercise. What are you going to do today? So forget about your hourly meetings, your 3 hours of revenue management meetings. I looked after plenty of hotels in my lifetime, and I was the worst person showing up for my own meetings. Because if they're not lively, everybody is daunted by talking about figures for 2.5 hours on a weekly basis. It's just a drain on everybody's time. If you can turn your meetings into agility, into collaborative, into water cooler conversations, you get the same results, but just much, much faster. There's nothing wrong having a daily meeting to really say, okay, what am I want to achieve today? What I want to achieve today is I want to look at Christmas. Okay, tomorrow, talk to me about Christmas. I don't want a list of 20,000 things that you're going to do, but what I want to know is, what are you going to do today so tomorrow we can have that conversation? And then you drive your business forward. Last but not least, it is already reality. There are systems out there where you can merge different data sets, where you can take those insights and really become, I want to say, as crazy as you like from a visualization and a complexity perspective, or a very easy way of going in to say, hey, I don't have all that information, but I have my on the books. I don't have pace, I don't have forecast, but I know how I finished last year. I know what my pricing is, and I know what my competitive set is doing. So while you might not have all of those data sets are out there, and you can get your fingers on them. Any questions? Thank you very much for having me.